Hi everybody and welcome back. My name's Laura Scott and I'm the Managing Director and Partner for our Australia and New Zealand business here at Adaptavate. And today I'm joined by James Masala, who's the Director of Growth and Partnerships at Enterprise AI. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Laura. Good to be here.
Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So James, today we're going to talk about the intersection between change and tech.
Yep.
And what it means for companies. And you're perfectly placed with your background based on your work with Barhead and now Enterprise AI. So I'd love to dig into that.
Absolutely.
So firstly, let's start. How did you get here? How are you at Enterprise AI? Take us through your journey.
So I've had a colourful past, would be a polite way of phrasing it.
Okay.
So I've worked in consultancies. I started my career at Ernst & Young, working in a risk and compliance type role, so consulting for their advisory office or firm. Then I moved into financial services. Coming from a finance background, I worked at Commonwealth Bank of Australia and Westpac, different roles in transformation and also business banking. So getting to know and understand those smaller businesses that still need transformation but need to do it on a much smaller scale and with a much smaller budget. And then I moved into the Microsoft ecosystem for an IT consultancy called Barhead Solutions, which I led a sales function in financial services, and really we were all about transforming customer engagement processes and technology, processes being the key thing. And that led me into the role I'm at the moment, which is Enterprise AI, working with the founder of both Adaptavate and Enterprise AI, Doug Ross, who you're very familiar with. And Doug's value proposition to me at the time was quite clear, and one that I stand behind now, insofar as technology does not work unless it's led by business principles and business process. So Enterprise AI is an AI-enabled platform that allows organizations to pilot AI in a safe environment and then scale that. So that means different things to different people, but it's a really exciting role and cool product.
It is, and one at the absolute cutting edge of technology, which is super exciting.
It is.
Great.
It's really exciting.
So let's dig into technology and change.
Yep.
You've worked with some big businesses. You've worked with over 150 SMEs in your time. Let's think about how, when we implement a technology, what is the mindset shift that needs to happen of leaders and teams when we're implementing technology?
It's a good question. I would say the first shift needs to be, again, back to my earlier point, what's the business value that we're trying to achieve? So it's very easy to fall into the trap of seeing something that's shiny and new and thinking that that's going to be able to solve problems. Unfortunately, that leads to shoehorning a solution into a problem that may not even need to be solved. So the mindset shift, I think, for organizations, particularly in an innovation cycle as fast as the one we're in, is all about thinking through the business value first. So what is going to yield the quickest or the largest result for us, and then focusing on that. That gives you a safe starting point, something that you can measure yourself against, and then you can start to trial new technologies, I would think.
Okay, so you've made a great point there, Jimmy, in that I want to dig into the outcomes that you were talking about. Let's talk about the people, process, and tools with technology, and because that's our ethos, right? You need to do all three. You really do, to make it a successful transformation. I'd love your opinion on this.
I'd love to share it. So maybe back to an earlier principle, that transformation in all of my time across big banks and to small companies is typically associated with technology. In my mind, transformation doesn't mean technology. Transformation means enabling people to work in different ways by sometimes leveraging technology. And so I think that is a shift in mindset as well, and an awareness that people, I think that should be a common ethos and mantra and way of working or thinking about transformation with everyone that we work with. And putting people and process first helps you identify the business value in the transformation, and then you can be enabled by technology. And in some instances, it's not technology, as you know, it's sometimes restructuring or thinking about a problem or reimagining a process differently. But technology can be a way of delivering that transformation, I guess.
I agree. And look, I've worked in software for half my life, and I couldn't agree with you more on, if we base ourselves around a technology could come to end for life, or it could have, a massive change in the development of the technology that fundamentally changes a business and the way it works. So if we set ourselves up right from a people and a process perspective first, and be guided by what we want as a company, or what companies want and believe by, and the strategy to execution from a people and a process perspective, and let the tools be the enablement of the people and the processes. I think that's a really good point that you make there.
Yeah, I think as well, if you think about technology not as we often get asked, James, talk to us about a use case that you've seen in our vertical, horizontal line of business. I think that you should be thinking about the new wave of technology just as an enabler that lowers the barrier for any transformation. So large language models or generative AI can help to code, it can help to summarize, it can do a vast array of things. So don't really focus on what the technology can do. Figure out what you need it to do, and then engage with consultants, people that know what they're doing to help you get that far.
Jimmy, I'd like to talk about proactive and reactive transformation. So what's your advice to executives who are being pressured to do something with AI from a proactive perspective, small, large business, and to a reactive perspective?
So let's start with the definition. So reactive transformation is typically what you would see in large organizations that are typically driven by some type of remediation, compliance, legislative change. So your big banks will call transformation really just trying to keep up with the pace of change. Proactive transformation is more attractive, more revenue generating, identifying market opportunities, and then really transforming the way that you do and design business. So how do you interact with your customers in a different way? How do you allow your staff to conduct their day-to-day in a more exciting and efficient manner? And so I think the question really is, how do you get large organizations to be able to operate in that more proactive space, which is something that is not easy to do and goes against the grain of the organizational struggles. If you're a big company, how do you think and act more nimbly?
So exactly, Jimmy. So what advice, based on proactive and reactive definitions that you've just given us, would you give to executives who are struggling with where to start with AI?
I think the time pressure is important. Executives are being asked to show value quickly. And so it is very easy to dive into something without properly understanding the success or how to measure success of that initiative, experiment, etc. So I think executives that want to start now need to, again, go back to basic business principles. So how do we deliver value in a short period that's going to generate interest and allow us to open up the purse to a larger scale transformation? And so there's a few ways that you can do that. Make sure that your people are ready, right? So start again with people and process. When we want people to be ready, we need to actually create an awareness of what new tech can do. And so interestingly, I was thinking the other day, if you've got a monthly or a quarterly cadence that's all around networking and going to bowling and doing a panic room, I can't see why you wouldn't also take the opportunity to do something that's AI focused. Hackathon, workshops.
Yeah, cool.
I can understand that sounds a little bit lame at the surface, but the technology is much easier to use. I've never been able to code, but I use ChatGPT as much as anyone would. I'm sure you do as well. And so there are examples and opportunities to really have a bit of fun while also learning. And I think you'll find that in most organizations, people are primed and willing to learn and wanting to learn. They just want a bit of structure about how to go about it. So I think that's a good place for executives to start, is with people first.
I think you've raised a good point there, and we'll come back to the process and tools as well. But let's make it fun for teams. It's actually a gift for teams. I know I see it all the time, a gift for teams to be trained. And junior team members want more interactions with senior folks. They want to be sitting in the office. They want to hear the kitchen chat. They're actually excited to be back in the office, is what I'm hearing. And giving them the opportunity to have an AI like hackathon, that's cool. And I think that's a great idea. So for companies to lean into those types of things, as well as your, social engagements, let them use their brains in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. I think that even in their personal lives, people are using generative AI. So people are using ChatGPT in their personal lives, and that's why it's much easier to kind of, there's a natural pull and gravitation to, this is going to help me in my career as well as in my personal life. I'd love to know more about it. So yeah, I think it could be cool.
Yeah. So I was at a meeting the other day, and unfortunately I heard that somebody that is using chat was being seen to be cheating, which was a real shame, because she is cutting her output time in half. She's asked to do some really complex problem solving, and she's getting to output so much faster than her peers. But when she took the job that she was doing to her manager said, "Oh, did you use chat for this?" And her manager was almost frowned upon, which was a bit of a shame. So I said to her, have you talked to your manager about actually the outcomes that you have achieved based on getting to 80% really quickly and in half the time? She's absolutely still used her brain, and you can see that it's not just a chat output. Is this something that you're seeing in the market as well? Is that ethos around companies not approving AI?
Yeah, I think so. And I can see the resistance, I understand. But back to your earlier question around risk and compliance, I think that's where we need to see a shift. So where teams are, support teams like risk and compliance and governance teams, are not providing the right guardrails and partnering with their lines of business, it's very easy for the executives or decision makers in those lines of business to just pull the handbrake. So I think enabling a more trusting and open-minded workforce or executive team starts with providing guardrails so people know where they can and can't operate. But it is a shame, because I think not like turning off those types of tools is going to impact bottom line and a bunch of culture, a bunch of different softer intangibles as well. So that is a shame.
Especially for the young spunky kids that are coming through that want to use it and are hungry for it. I just don't think that we can turn it off. Yeah.
No, look, there are a few interesting studies around the perception of ChatGPT or large language models in students, so university students, and professors were asked to rate the outcome of certain papers. Some had been told that ChatGPT was used incorrectly, so muddled, and the end output of the study was that, if there was an assumption that ChatGPT had been used, then the output was automatically downgraded even in the event that it wasn't used. So I think it's a natural kind of human instinct to be untrusting of output that's been generated by machines or by large language models. I think it's something that we just need to think through and grapple with, because it needs to change.
Yeah. So I want to move away from AI, because I know it's the boardroom, buzzword at the moment.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the implementation of tech.
Sure.
What have you seen in the market with tech being, and I'll bundle them all up into, as I did before, any type of financial services implementation, AI, marketing software, anything like that. What is the change and people focus that still needs to happen to make tech successful?
So firstly, I'd say that the people and process side of transformation is always underinvested. Even if you have an internal capability, there's just not the right time and energy put into really focusing on drawing that out. And if you don't have an internal capability, then the dollar for dollar comparison is infinitesimally small. The ratios are not right. And so I find that quite interesting, because although the technology is a challenge to design, implement, right size, in comparison to, the human condition, it's actually relatively straightforward. So I always find that interesting. I think that to really get on the right side of transformation, then leaders do need to do three things. Incentivize. So make sure that there is a clear pull and a reason for wanting to change and move to the new technology. To measure. So make sure that success measures are clear and well communicated, and then make it easy. So is the technology easy enough to use, and is it compelling enough on its own devices for me to see the value in using it? Because I'm only going to do something if I want to do it at the end of the day. So they're the three things to kind of help me along that journey.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Love it. I couldn't agree more, Jimmy. Like, I think the amount of pieces of software that I've worked with where there hasn't been incentive for team members to actually use it because they want to do their jobs. and they want to actually engage with either the marketing team that they've been working with or the person in care that they're meant to be fully focused on, yet they're having to use this piece of software to do their job. So we do need to sell it to the end user, and we do need to, as you said, we do need to help them measure it, and then we absolutely need to make it easy for them, because everything is shiny, and it's shiny in a sales PowerPoint, but the second it gets to an end user, it's definitely not as good as what it seems. So great 3 points.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, think of it about yourself as a user of technology. As a user, not as a purchaser, you want it to be invisible. And if it's invisible and just operating in the background without you having to think about it, typically it's doing the job that you want it to do. That's what Apple does so well.
Yes, exactly. So Jimmy, let's go to whole functions of business. Once we've embedded a piece of technology, how do we ensure it's not just put in the corner into a marketing function where it has serious potential to be scaled throughout a business?
Good question. So let's think about the life cycle of a new technology. I think the best way to do that is to start with a pilot, a small incremental shift that allows you to really win over the hearts and minds of a small group of people so that you can focus on your change approach. If you do that successfully, you'll notice that there is more of a pull, a gravitational pull from people looking over at their colleagues and saying, that's actually pretty cool. How can I apply that to my own space? And there's probably examples that you and I can talk about with some of the people that we're working with where that's been done really well. In addition to that, so making it an attractive proposition that people all of a sudden are demanding rather than you pushing. I think tone from the top, right? So making it very visible that leaders are using, thinking, talking about the new technology and solution, make it a lot easier for people to follow suit. Again, I do think the technology needs to be invisible as much as possible. And so the only way to do that is to put those natural forces in place. Make sure that it's attractive, start small, incrementally shift. And then once you get to that tipping point of, hey, that's pretty cool, can I have it? You kind of won the battle. And then cross-functional teams as well. So I think with things like AI, we hear a lot about centers of excellence or centralized models. But I think having clarity on the accountability or the roles for those teams, so that if I'm working in marketing, but I know that there's a center of excellence that can give me the guardrails on how I'm supposed to operate, I know what I need to focus on versus what you're going to help me with. If I don't understand that model and it's widely communicated and understood, I think it's a lot harder to get involved in the transformation or the change and the technology, if that makes sense. So clearer roles, make sure you start small and scale the adoption incrementally, and then make sure there's really clear accountability clearer visibility from executives.
So I want to double click on the executives part. Do you think if we just think about tech, it's not just the tech executives that we need involved. Who else do you think is really crucial in a business to make sure that we can activate tech thoughtfully?
Yeah, so if we move away from the verb executives and talk about leaders, ideally the executive should be setting a really strong tone because they're seen as leaders in the organization. But I think for a transformation to stick, you kind of need everyone across the organization to lead in some capacity. So rather than being a victim of change, really understanding where you want to head and where the business is heading, and then jumping on the train and helping with that push and momentum. So I think to answer your question, who is important across the organization or who needs to be involved, it's kind of everyone, which is a bit of a cop-out cheesy answer, but that's really what you need to get to. It starts with leadership because you can set really clear tone and an expectation of where we're headed, but then there needs to be a shift and a pull of everyone in the organization, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And look, I was just having a meeting earlier today with a potential client actually, and talking to them about horizons. And we don't need to, I think, bite it off all in one go. Let's set 3 horizons of where we want to get to. Let's get some quick wins, and then Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 equate to a movement towards the North Star of where we need to go. And as we move through that, I think the really critical thing is to co-design with leaders along the way and get them in the room. The amount of companies that we speak to where leaders actually haven't sat in the same room for longer than an hour together is wild. And that, I think, is a huge shift hopefully not just post-COVID, but let's just call it post-COVID, of getting leaders back in a room around a whiteboard and solving these big problems together of how we're going to move forward and steer the ship in the right direction. So that's great.
You raise a really good point.
Yeah.
Just on that, I think that this just kind of sparked a thought. I think that leaders do need to operate at two speeds. So yes, you need to break things down into bite-sized chunks. Otherwise, you're not going to get started because you've been overwhelmed with all the opportunities. But you do need to also be thinking and setting that very clear North Star of where you're heading. So it's kind of how do you look long and play short, and that will allow you to pivot and change. If you're kind of operating this agile sprint model, but you have a very clear North Star, I don't think you can go wrong. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think I'm just kind of echoing what you're saying. It's as well as metricizing, so having very clear long-term success measures, but then short-term measures that are more leading. So, how many and nothing that's tech focused, not how many features are we releasing in this sprint, how are we actually changing the customer experience, how are we reducing call volumes on an 8-week sprint cycle while also still delivering towards the grander targets.
Nice. And so that's at a leader level. Let's talk about a team level. How do we make sure that this tech that we're implementing at a team level doesn't overwhelm them?
I think so. It does come down to co-design, like you said. So making sure that people that are using the tech are engaged throughout the process. I think the role that leaders, particularly tech leaders, who should be well versed in the frameworks to build the solution, need to just play a very strong guidance role. So make sure you don't get feature bloat, where the users of the technology are saying, "Oh, it'd be nice to have this. It'd be nice to have that." We need to be very clear on, minimum. This solution will help us achieve X goal if, and then deliver to those. And then once that's out in market, continue to iterate and change based on real user feedback, because it's easy to hypothesize and say, "Man, I really like that. I think that would change the way that I do business or would have X impact." And when it comes down to it, you don't really use the feature at all. And we find that with a lot of the solutions that we have built and delivered to people, only 40% of the features actually gets used. You think about how much you use your iPhone or any piece of technology. You don't use all of it.
Jimmy, I'm going to go back to AI. What is going to separate companies that are experimenting with AI for, let's say, the next year, and they've got a roadmap of a year before they are humming, as opposed to those that are truly investing, that are forcing teams to go AI first? What do you think the difference will be?
So I think getting stuck in an experimental cycle or a pilot loop is something that we're seeing a lot in market. And if you think to, again, why that happens, it's because there is no direction that's been set or clear articulation of what needs to be achieved. And it's okay to experiment, and we speak a lot about deploying iterative value. But to do that, you do need to operate at two different speeds for two different purposes. So one team can be focused on foundations, data, change, governance. And the other team needs to be focused on experimenting and piloting, but piloting with a purpose to go live and to continue scaling out the deployment and usage of that technology. And so what's going to be the difference is, I think the companies that are able to do that with success, operate at that two-speed model, to build while also setting the foundation, they will be in a position to actually derive value from their solutions. And the companies that are stuck in the experiment cycle will realize that the work they're doing is just table stakes. It's no longer a differentiator. It's, oh no, that's BAU now for organizations that have succeeded at that two-speed model. So I think that's going to be the difference, as well as just a lower cost to implement and change. So that the more mature an organization gets, I think the sharper the transformation cost is going to end up being, because generative AI is going to reduce the cost of transformation from coding to governance to checks and balances and dashboarding, all of that. So the sooner you start, the cheaper it's going to become, and the better you're going to become quicker.
There's a study that shows the amount of uptake with ChatGPT, just as an example, to 200,000 users is huge really quickly. And I know that's a small subset, but the actual value that companies are finding is only the top 20% of companies are actually finding value from using AI, which just goes to show that it's not being embedded throughout companies for maybe value, maybe trust. Like there are so many factors surrounding it at the moment. I mean, we're not early on anymore. That I think if we're not embracing it now, you've got to get on the bandwagon before you miss it.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So, Laura, it's a really good point, and something that we're seeing a lot in market is the concept of usage of a particular tool versus the value that it derives. Mm-hmm. And so there are AI services, co-pilots, that are really general in nature, but typically solve a very small part of a larger process. And to derive the most value out of this new technology, Gen AI and all of the services that come with it, we find that you need to think about an entire end-to-end workflow and then integrate the AI throughout steps in that process so that it's orchestrated and easy for someone to continue deriving value throughout each step of the process.
Let's give a real example. Let's use Daisy as an example. So firstly, if you give a 2-minute overview of what Daisy is, because it's a really good example of efficiencies of throughput used in the market.
Yeah. So Daisy is a solution that we've built on top of Enterprise AI, which we're really proud of. It's live in market, and we're working with 3 councils to help, as you say, increase throughput of development application planning assessments.
Which everybody finds a pain in
the rear end.
Yep. So I've got a pool and I want to be able to, or I want a pool and I want to be able to apply, that it just, everything that surrounds that gives me a headache. So Daisy is helping the end user, Laura and Jimmy, to be able to apply for a pool a lot easier.
Correct. So we talk about some of the principles that we've spoken about. The first is around integrating across an entire workflow. So you take the applicant experience, instead of just focusing on one step, i.e. What are the planning or control regulations for my local council? Instead of just thinking about solving that particular problem with a piece of solution, like a large language model, think about the whole applicant experience. So not only do I need to figure out what the right controls are, but I need to figure out what the zoning requirements are for my particular address. I need to figure out the types of documents that I need to submit as part of the process. I need to figure out what fees might apply if I was to proceed with an application. And so what we've done is, rather than provide a point solution, a single solution for a single problem in that entire applicant experience, we've built out a digital workbench that steps out each stage in the process and augments every step with AI. And I think that's how you start to get usage equaling value, because it's essentially providing an interface that's a guardrail, pushing people along the steps in the process while also helping them with the power and benefit of AI. And so, yeah, that is something that we're incredibly proud of and glad to be partnering with councils on.
But there are, yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And there are so many more opportunities that we could apply this end-to-end process with AI on top of it, like procurement, as an example.
Correct. And so procurement use case would be, workflow or process would be onboarding a new supplier. So in that process, there are a bunch of due diligence activities that could really easily be accelerated with artificial intelligence. There are contract terms that need to be reviewed. And again, there are solutions in market. There are co-pilots that have been designed to review at pace fair contract terms against a contract that's been provided by a supplier. But if you don't orchestrate that at a process or workflow level, you can find that you don't actually get the efficiencies, because people are still context switching. They're still taking the time in between tasks to hand off, pass to other people. But having it in a single workbench and experience that's guided by clear process steps, but also augmented and enabled by artificial intelligence, is where you start to actually get the value.
Yeah.
And again, it needs to start back with the whole business lens. It's not the technology that's doing the job. It's actually, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? We're trying to onboard suppliers faster with the least amount of overhead. And then you plug the technology in.
Great. So let's talk about governance. AI and governance. What are you seeing in the market that is being implemented to make sure that AI is implemented thoughtfully?
Yeah, so there's certain appetites at the head, like the most conceptual level. There's appetites that need to be set on the types of risk. It's essentially introduced a new profile of risk. So, it's a form of technology or operational risk that needs to be thought of, and an appetite needs to be set. So what are we absolutely not comfortable doing? And then where do we need to kind of build our guardrails? And I think just as we advise from a technological standpoint, we advise because of the pace of innovation and modular type approach where there are no big regrets or sunk costs if you invest too heavily in something. You kind of need to do the same thing from a governance standpoint. So how do you structure your frameworks and your review cycles and your monitoring in a way that allows you to react to changes, because there will be more automated monitoring of large language models and audit logs and that type of thing.
So last question, Jimmy. From a exec's perspective, starting out on their AI journey, what's one thing they should avoid and one thing they should prioritize?
I wish I had something profound for you, but it's going to be a repeat of what I've said. The one thing to avoid is technology for technology's sake. Do not find the shiny thing and then try to retrofit it into a business problem. Start with the business problem first, and then interact with people that might know a little bit more than you about the tech and figure out a way to get it done.
Great.
But start with the business. And one thing to prioritize is people. So rising tides, get everyone familiar with what the technology can do, hands-on stuff as much as possible, hackathons, workshops, guided by third parties, people that may know more about you, but the cost is more of a time investment than a dollar cost. So prioritize that. And I think if you do those two things, avoid technology and prioritize people and change, then you're on the right track. You're taking a positive first step.
Yeah, and I mean, we've worked together. I think your second point of prioritizing people and change, don't throw it over the fence. Take care of the people that are going to be your biggest advocates out in market and that can actually help you embed it and that will believe in it and will help you scale it, because that will fundamentally change your business. And it's going back to the business value. It will help you cascade your strategy faster. It will help you get to your business outcome faster. So thanks, Jimmy. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
It's been a pleasure
You
to be
are
here.
a mover and shaker in the market, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again in our next episode.